Hi, everybody, whether you're with us live or you're watching the recording, I'm super excited that you're here tonight. My name is Ani Anderson. I'm the CEO of Motivation Beyond Measure. We're talking about the inner game of motivation. And tonight we have a really special presentation for you. We're joined by Janice Grodsky. Janice owns her own coaching business and she works with us at Motivation Beyond Measure. And tonight we're going to be talking about specifically about one of the methodologies that we use, cross mapping, for purpose and for goal achievement. Janice, I'm super excited that you're here with us. I think this is a topic that's going to be a little bit different than people are used to hearing about. And I'm really excited to hear your philosophy on purpose and goal achievement. So welcome to the forum. I'm excited that you're here.
Thank you, Ani. Welcome to everyone. I am also so very excited to be here talking about cross mapping, goal setting, purpose, because that encompasses wholeness, which is near and dear to my heart. I love this point of view in using cross mapping, so I'm ready to roll.
Awesome, Janice. Great. So I want to just hit some controversy right away, actually. When we're in the SBMC program and we're talking about goal achievement, oftentimes I will tell the students that it's not so important to me that the client meets their goal. And when I say that, people are like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? We're coaches. We're supposed to help people meet their goals. And there's all of this like resistance and pushback. You know, we hear all the time out there about how important it is to, especially as a coach, it's about the goals and meet the goals and how to meet the goals. And there's so much about this. But really what I'm coming from when I'm talking about how it's not so important to help somebody meet the goal. I mean, there's a few things around that. One is that the journey is really important, right? Like the going through the process. But there's this other thing that actually I want to start with. A lot of times people set goals that aren't really theirs. Like they're based on old stories, they're based on old patterning, right? And I mean, I've done this in my own life where I've said I want things that, I don't, when I look back at, it's probably not my goal. It's really in the truth of who I am, And so I'm curious, as you've been working with people, have you seen that come up? It's like the goal isn't super aligned for somebody.
Over and over and over. And I think one of the biggest hurdles of coaching really is getting across that aligned decision-making idea. They're like, wait, what? If I, truly I, and we identify that it's I that truly want this thing, not because I should or my dad did, or this is the way it is. Like I can make a decision that way. Like it's that first awareness is incredible.
It's a huge amount of permission, isn't it? And I think as adults, we would think that we don't need permission granted, but there is something to that, isn't there?
Oh, we need more permission than we even can consciously understand.
Yeah.
And it also is one of the reasons that I actually love cross mapping. And I've realized that cross mapping is my favorite form of energy medicine.
Tell me more about why you say that.
Oh God, well, I'm a Reiki master. Reiki is a form of energy medicine, and I studied Reiki about 7 years ago and utilize it quite often. And I love it. However, it's the concept of it is a little bit more difficult for others to kind of have a conscious awareness around. And that's not the same as cross mapping. Cross mapping is something that people directly experience, not only just with, someone like myself or you facilitating, but it's something that they can learn and utilize themselves.
Yeah. So let's back up a second and talk about purpose for a moment. So when you and I talk about purpose, when an SBMC coach talks about purpose, we're talking about a being state. We're not talking about something that someone is doing. And that can be different. Like there's different ways of talking about purpose out there in the world. And some people talk about purpose in terms of what you're doing. We talk about what you're doing more as your mission, but purpose is a being state. And so I know that you have I don't even know if I have the right word, like a really super enthusiastic view of the way that an SBMC practitioner approaches purpose. Actually, let's just talk about that for a second. For you in your own life, when you started to really understand and align your concept of purpose with who you are in your being, and for you, because your purpose is about wholeness, right?
Yeah.
What kind of things did that start to open up for you in your life?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think for me that first of all, understanding my own personal definition of wholeness, and also continually working to understand what that means in different elements of my life, different areas of my life, if you will. Understanding that my soul being thrives in a place of wholeness is what, like, my body's totally tingling right now. And that is a way that I know that I am being on purpose. And it's recognizing, I'll say it this way because I know we'll probably get to this, both sides of the adventure of life and
Right.
the way that we live.
Right. So the way that we would define purpose or talk about purpose at Motivation Beyond Measure through the lens of SBMC work really does have two sides. It's not just like your purpose is how you love to feel and your greater version of yourself kind of thing, because oftentimes we find that when we just look at that side of purpose without looking at the fact that sometimes life is hard, sometimes life is challenging, sometimes we don't feel good and things are stressful and things like that. When we don't look at both sides, people get really stuck. So let's talk about, as defining purpose and having both sides, let's talk a little bit about how that looks for your clients, Janice. So one of the things that I notice is like this light bulb kind of goes off behind people's eyes when we start to talk about purpose in this way. And it permission actually is coming up again for me. Like, it's this idea that all of a sudden I'm not broken, I'm not wrong, I'm not bad, I'm not off purpose, I'm not lost when I don't feel great. And there's this like light bulb, this light that goes off behind people's eyes when we start to talk about things like that. How have you experienced, as you're talking about purpose, having both sides from a client perspective? What does that look like for you?
It's really interesting because I was speaking with a client just last week, and she is explaining to me, I've had this conversation with a prospective client and they didn't sign up. I had this conversation with a prospective client, they didn't sign up. Nobody wants to join me. Nobody wants to be part of, my group program right now. She was getting a lot of rejection. And when I just brought it to her attention that, awesome, you're exactly on purpose. What? She couldn't understand, first of all, as her coach, like, why would you say something like that to me? I think was her immediate reaction. And it opened the door for a further and deeper conversation regarding her purpose and how she shows up in the world.
Right. So I want to just go back to what you just said. Why would you say that as a coach? Because a lot of coaches or therapists or leaders would say that. Why would you tell somebody that? I mean, we're talking about how to help people meet their goals, right? And one way to help people to meet their goals is to help them identify their purpose. And so we get somebody in a program and we're helping them to meet their goals. And then it appears that trying to figure out how not to say the SH word, hits the fan. all hell breaks loose. And the coach is saying, yay. And that's why is that so? I mean, you start, let's talk more about why that's important. Because we've seen this over and over and over with people, right?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. I think the awareness piece really is that in my this particular situation I'm talking about, she was under the understanding every time I talk to somebody, they should want to join my program. And the idea of it's not always like that. And it's also on purpose, and on purpose for you to have the sensations that you're having right now. There's more to the picture than like really just the one direction. That she was looking, and she was very polarized in that. So what we did in that moment, of course, was cross mapping.
Right. So let's put that on a shelf for a second. I want to get to that. When you said it's not just one direction, what you reminded me of is, I'll bet, everybody on the call, let me know if you're here live, if you've seen this picture, a picture like this. It's like the path to success. And here's start and here's finish, and there's like a straight line. Like the path of success as we think it's supposed to be, and there's a straight line, and then it's the path of success that it really is, and there's the dot, and there's all of these squiggles, and then it gets to like the finish line. Is anybody who's here live has seen that? I think it's interesting what you said, because oftentimes when we're trying to help somebody get to a goal and it appears that it's not working, right? It appears that they're coming up against all of these challenges, right? Like, we need to have a tool and a frame of reference so that people can remain aware as we're continuing to walk through the process, because otherwise their minds are all wrapped up in the stories and the shame and the guilt and the fear and all of this stuff, and their bodies contract. We need to help them remain open so that they can go through all of those wiggles and squiggles to get to wherever their success lies. I mean, can you think of an instance where you were coaching somebody and you thought that you knew the way towards their goal achievement, but then something else came out of the blue, because we're actually helping them to create insight where it's like, oh, I didn't realize that was the way we were going to go. I think, I'll toss it to you in a second, Janice. For me, I think it's part of the interesting inquiry to be in a coaching session where I've got to really let go of how I think it's supposed to be, or what I think the process is going to be, so that the intuition, so that the wisdom can arise from the client, right?
Right. So I was working with a client who had experienced some really deep and very, very strong emotions, and they were very, very close to the surface. And when we got to the point that we started her cross mapping process, what I had expected was, this is probably going to take a long time. It may not work at all. Because her emotions were very strong and very deep from the information that we had, I had really a different set of lenses on. And when we got to the point, the choice point, she was like, oh, easy. And I had all of these stories that I had created. Of course, I want to be prepared as a coach, right? So,
right.
I have my little magic, toolkit here, ready to go here, ready to go there.
Yeah.
But really the brilliance of cross mapping for her was the awareness of choice of, oh, well, I want that.
So let's break this down a little bit and talk a little bit about what cross mapping is, and let's use the lens of the story that you're telling. Okay. So you have a client and they're experiencing something, and they're telling you about an experience that they're having. And we have people become aware of what that experience actually feels like, so that we can take the emotional aspects of whatever they're experiencing, or the physical aspects of what they're experiencing. Sometimes it's like, pain, or you have some stories actually that perhaps we'll talk about other things like ADHD and Parkinson's and stuff like that. That's really cool. So you take that experience, we talk about what is actually happening in the body, right? And then we help somebody to tangibly feel that there is another experience that they could possibly experience. Because when we're in that emotional experience, it's like the only thing that we feel. But all of a sudden, as a coach, we're giving it an enlightened experience to say, hey, there are other options as to how you feel. And then helping somebody to choose how they want to feel. So let's just talk about the story that you were just telling, Janice, and go through this a little bit. So when the client was really emotional and everything was at the surface, what was that? Do you remember what that was feeling like to her?
Oh, yes, she had very sharp pain in her heart chakra. Her body was physically tense. I mean, she showed me her arm, and her fingers were, crumpled with tension.
Okay, so that's like the baseline of where she was at entering the conversation, right? So we could try to like intellectually manage all of that stuff. We could also try, if people have body working in any capacity in their, magic backpack, as you were saying, we could try body working things. So we're trying to like work the muscles through all this tension, right? So when you started the cross mapping process and you started to help her be aware that she had another option, do you remember what it was that she was feeling, that she was calling up, I guess I want to say?
She was calling up a flutter, I believe is what she called it, a flutter or a tingling in the lower part of her body, which was almost as far away from what she was sensing in her chest and from her arms.
That's interesting, because sometimes in cross mapping, the sensations are in the same place. Sometimes they're in a really different place in the body. So with this client, in this experience, in this moment, by the way, because it might be different in another moment, right? Like what she was calling up was actually in a different part of her body. So let's just pause for a second here and talk about how that might be beneficial, Janice. Like, what do you feel like when somebody's experiencing like all of the sensation in their chest, and then they start to experience something in another part of their body? What do you find is beneficial about that?
Well, I think the biggest piece is that they have another option, because when we're in this particular example, this is not a sensation that she wanted to feel.
Right.
Not at all. She had actually spent a lot of her life trying to ignore this.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And it had, in her words, become grander and grander over time. I'll never forget that. Grander and grander. Like, that's bigger than bigger.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
In her language. So the ability for us to understand that, yes, we may physically be having, that, like in her case, the sensation up in her heart, in her chest, and in her arms, and taking a moment and trusting herself. This doesn't have anything to do with me as the coach, but trusting herself to be aware of her own body, her own energy, and find and acknowledge this other sensation.
Right. So oftentimes as coaches are trained to follow their intuition. It's actually a big kind of buzz thing. One of the cool things about coaching is that the coach follows their intuition. And I think one of the interesting things that you're talking about in terms of using more of a sensation-based and somatic methodology is it's actually that we're following the client's intuition.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. In cross mapping, what we don't do is ask them, hey, if you're feeling this, what's the opposite of that? Well, we may ask that, but I don't tell them what that is. I don't say to a client, hey, it must be tingly if you're feeling constriction. It must be relief or release. Do you think you can find that in your toes?
Right.
You don't, that's me trying to create something that then, we could get into a whole other thing that either she could totally reject, the client could totally reject, or take on something that doesn't belong to them.
Yeah, exactly. Take on something that doesn't belong to them, reject an idea, but it's coming from within them. As you say that, I'm remembering how many times in a client session that I've asked somebody what they're experiencing, and they say, for example, constriction. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, well, if I want to help them to get out of that constriction, I need to find loose, or I need to feel expansion, something like that. And then, but I'll then say to them, so what's the opposite of that? And they will come up with something that I would do it to come up with, right?
Yeah, that I think is one of the most fun parts of cross mapping, because I have heard so many different sensations in different parts of the body that I myself have not necessarily experienced. And it's really fun.
Yeah, it is really fun. I was on a soapbox, I think it was yesterday, talking about how, it can be challenging for people in the therapeutic and in the coaching world, in any kind of service, I think, delivery world, to find somebody who we really click with, to find somebody who we really feel like we get results with, to find somebody who we feel like we can trust, And it's my experience. Like, for me personally, I will never hire anybody who doesn't do somatic work, because if a person does somatic work, I know that they are using my intuition. I know they are getting the best from me. I know they are tapping into my genius, right? Without the somatic work, we're leaning into what you know as a practitioner, or what methods you know as a practitioner, or whatever. And we're leaning into the practitioner, but we really want to lean into the genius of the client. It is a fascinating, fun experience as the practitioner, even though I think sometimes we feel like we need to be the expert. I mean, let's speak to that for a second, because I know I've experienced this. I want to hear, you and I haven't had this conversation, so I'm interested to hear your experience. Do you ever get nervous when you're working with clients? Because you don't know what is going to come out of their mouths.
All the time. All the time.
Yeah. Yeah, because you kind of got to be in the flow of whatever is present.
Yeah, and love it, and not be shocked by it, and be calm and cool, and be professional, so on and so on.
Yeah. And so people come up with, using their intuition, using their their somatics in their body, they come up with these things while we're working with them, right? And then just to get us back on the talking about what you were talking about with cross mapping, we get them to a choice point. So we get them to a place where they have experienced what they don't want to experience, and they've experienced that they can experience something different. So let's talk about some of the ways in which that shows up for clients, right? Because I can remember, for example, doing cross mapping with somebody, and she had abuse in her history. We got to the place where she was able to experience something other than the uncomfortable sensations that she didn't want to feel. And all of a sudden, everything hid, like it just all went radio silent, because like feeling anything is not okay. And then we got to work with the sensations of numbness, which sometimes people are like, wait a minute, what? Like, how does numb have a sensation? Everything has a sensation. That's a topic for another day. But what has that been like, bringing a patient to a choice point?
Oh gosh, I think my most impactful experience in this is recently when I taught cross mapping to my son. And it makes me very, very emotional, because my son has ADD, and it's very, very difficult for him to study. And he decided to start college.
Right.
And he was terrified. And he also wants to, of course, for himself, be a good student, but he really wants to be a good student for his father. He really wants to be a good student for me and his girlfriend, so that the people who are most important in his life. And he was having some struggles with that. And I taught him how to cross map. And he literally wept. My 18-year-old boy, young man, he wept, not only because it worked, that was the bonus, but also he didn't know that his struggle could be any other way.
Right.
And that he had the power once he learned this within himself. And it's incredibly beautiful.
So how does that relate to somebody living on purpose, Janice?
Oh. When you are living on purpose in your place of wholeness, we fit. We fit in the world, we fit in the universe, we fit in nature. And I think for myself, it is the most peaceful place that I can be. And with my clients that I have served in purpose work in this way, knowing that they do have choice points, knowing that they do have ability to make aligned decisions that do belong with them. I mean, we can just roll backwards to almost everything that we've said to this point, all the things, as is very popular to say right now. Our purpose and understanding what being on purpose really truly means is a really great gift.
What a gift. I agree so much. I was just doing an interview before we're having this talk and talking about how, you feel like when you're really on purpose, it's life coursing through your veins. It's just it's a remarkable thing. There's so many words to use about being able to turn somebody on to that. So I want to get some engagement from our live participants here in the chat for right now. We're going to open up mics later, but I want to hear about your experience about having clients be in relationship to purpose, whether it's that it's hard to help people to find their purpose, or it's easy for you and you love it, or whatever your experience is with helping your clients be on purpose. Maybe you don't really have an experience of what that feels like yet. Chime in the chat. Part of our mission here, like I said before we started the recording at Motivation Beyond Measure, is opening the windows and the doors to those of us who are doing natural, energetic, and holistic practices. So it's not something that we have to be embarrassed about, feel weird about, or is happening behind closed doors, because the fact is that natural, energetic, and holistic practices work. And when you follow the process of them, they work every time. We're going to talk about that in a second, Janice, right? When you follow the process works. So it's time for us to talk about these things out in the open, to be having the conversations so that more people can be using these practices and change their lives. One of the things, so please pop in the chat your relationship to purpose with working on the clients. I want to have a conversation about this while you're doing that. So Janice, one of the things that comes up all the time in service-based industries is about the results that we get with clients. And I have seen some shocking statistics in terms of the kinds of results that most people should expect to get with their clients. you should expect 10% of your people to finish a certification program. You should expect 30% of people to get good results in your live classes. You should expect 50% of the people to get good results in a group program. And some of those, I mean, when I say 50%, I think that I'm making that up. Like usually the numbers are pretty darn low. At Motivation Beyond Measure, we have the expectation that 100% of our clients are going to get results. So let's talk about what you see in terms of people getting results in your programs. Because like it's this interesting kind of like living organism, right? In terms of people getting results. But let's talk a little bit about what that looks like for everyone to be progressing towards their goals.
One of the experiences of a recent client is that she was trying to utilize her calendar and just really overbooked. It didn't have a way to really fit everything in. And so we worked through to her purpose. And when she realized that she was filling space with, again, a lot of things that really weren't hers, things that she thought that she should be doing, not things that necessarily were in alignment with her, she was then able to shift and create a realistic calendar and step into the and of where I don't have to give up my social life or other things that I want to do, or do, my business, so to speak. She realized that there was the and. She could do both as long as she was making decisions from an aligned place. That awareness brought her to having a few clients come in to her energy.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
right. Like all of a sudden they just kind of like magically come in and people think, where the hell did that come from? Right.
Yeah. And in that happening for her specifically, it was really like night and day from where she was before in overwhelm to where she is now in ease, and she gives grace to herself. And it's so beautiful as a coach to see the clients embody this work, take on this work, and use cross mapping for themselves.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've probably said this time and time again, that we think that if we really help and empower somebody to be independent, that we're going to lose a client. Like, and as a coach, or a therapist or service provider of any kind, we can be out there going, oh my God, I need to retain my clients because I can't lose a client because I got to go find another one. And that takes a lot of energy and all this stuff. So we get kind of nervous about empowering somebody towards independence so they don't need us anymore. But actually, you and I have been in a relationship now for a few years, right? Like, and it just keeps getting better and better, I think. I mean, how do you see that? It's kind of almost hard to describe, isn't it?
And well, first of all, to bring up something that we haven't quite yet, is cross mapping is what brought us together.
Is
the
it?
very first way in how I got introduced to you and Brian was through a cross mapping program that I was shown, and then got into connection with you because I was having a physical situation.
That's right, your shoulder.
Yeah.
I forgot about that, Janice.
Right. So it's to me, I love this example especially when I'm talking with other coaches who are building their business or wanting to build their business, and they have this idea of clients, like what you're saying. I think I've been around for 4 or 5 years now, right? It started in one place and expanded through to where I am now as a part of the team with you, which is so wonderful and super exciting. So I thought that was a fun tidbit to share too.
I totally forgot about that. I'm glad that you did. That's really fun. That's really funny. So I mean, just in your own, what you just said about goal achievement, right? Like we have this idea sometimes of where we're going, and that's exactly where we're going. We just might not know how to get there because, of course, the how we get there needs to emerge, and it's it's a co-collaboration of energy. But there's also these times when we think we want something and we end up kind of somewhere else, and we're like, oh my gosh, now this is really great. It sounds like that's a little bit of what you're experiencing.
Oh, completely. 5 years ago, I didn't really have an idea of where I was exactly going. I didn't fully understand my purpose. And it would be really interesting if I could find a journal line from 5 years ago and to see the things that I was talking about or the ideas that I had, and compare that to now being a certified SBMC coach and, having the opportunity to work with you guys on a regular basis and have amazing clients and be part of the community in this movement of using tools such as cross mapping to literally change the world.
Yeah, right.
It seems like a dream that I don't even know that I could have thought of or written down. It is kind of like, oh, I'll put the yacht on my vision board, or I'll put this island, and these big giant things that we think aren't achievable. And one of the things that I have learned about knowing and understanding my purpose is, if I have a desire to change the lives of women all across the world, then I can do that. It's making that aligned decision of the way to do it.
Yeah, like your mind, our minds can get totally expanded. So just to bring it back to this idea of goal achievement, which I think is almost like laughable, actually, when we think of like, how are we going to achieve our goals? Janice, would you like to make $5 tomorrow? Like that's a lot of times when we're setting goals, like where our heads are. But when we start to, with our clients, and I think we get this too, as a somatic practitioner, we actually get to be in alignment with the work too. Oh, goody. We get to be in that expanded place, but we start to really like go into the wholeness of who a person is, what they have to offer. We like to say what's in your acorn, like this idea that like the acorn can grow into the oak tree, right? So we can tap into this acorn within somebody, and all of a sudden, all of these things start to emerge, and these opportunities are attracted to them that we probably couldn't see before. You're reminding me, as you were telling your story, that in 2011, I was in a staff meeting with the folks who I worked with at our wellness center, and we went around and said what our big vision goals were for ourselves. And at that time, my big vision goal, this is the biggest I could think, was that I was going to be a holistic practitioner who had a private practice in a room in my house, which that was as like as big as I could think at that moment. But when we actually, I had a client experience just recently where Janice, we helped her to tap into her purpose, and all of a sudden she was like, expanded thinking, expanded thinking, expanded thinking, right? And it does start to morph and change like where those goals are. So it's almost like goal setting is like, and goal accomplishment, it's almost like this living, breathing thing. Would you agree?
Oh, it's kind of like putting this spark on the whole row of fireworks. No. The expansion possibility. And then of course we know, because, well, as an SBMC coach, I have been trained to really understand and embody like both sides. The wholeness is to also understand this grand expansion, and then to recognize when there's contraction, or, as we're talking about, the like going into hiding. That's a way that, we've talked about here today. And my head is really spinning. I have these firecrackers going off in my head, right? That visual. I kind of lost a little bit of the rest of my train of thought right there. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Brian was saying in the chat that he's curious what Janice would tell herself 5 years ago.
The first thing I would say is sit back and breathe. Get up and walk around.
And you used to be a person who was just like on the edge of your, like in it, right? So that yeah, like this, and now you're a person who can sit back and really let it happen, which I'm assuming is a more comfortable way to walk through life.
Absolutely. And I recognize it across different areas of my life, different parts of my wholeness. I'm not as hard on myself in other areas of my life. I'm not as strict, if you will. I allow myself to chill, different things like that.
Yeah. So we're going to open up the mics here in a second. I want to hear the people who are here with us live. I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your insights. I want to hear your shares. So we're going to do that in just a second. So I'm warning you now, so you get ready with that, unmute button. So Janice, what kind of advice would you offer a coach, therapist, service provider who would like to have more people meeting their goals?
Well, my first bit of advice I think I would first really want to know in what way do they want to serve their clients? And if their way is in alignment with motivation beyond measure, I would definitely say, have a conversation with Ani, have a conversation with Brian, find out more about the sensation-based motivation coaching process, the certification, the cross-mapping certification. I never knew that these really amazing life-changing tools existed, or that I could be someone who could learn them and then really help people change their lives with them. So if any of this is in alignment with the way that anybody is seeing their future, seeing their path with their clients, or if this information is opening them up to seeing that, come with us.
You said something that really struck me, and as I'm being present with you, it's floating away the exact words that you used, but it's like, if you think that you can be changing more lives, you can. I think I really want people to understand and hear that, because I think that there are a lot of service professionals, because we've been serving service professionals for years and helping people to do what they do better. And one of the things that we notice is people think sometimes, I wonder if I could be changing more lives. And the answer is that you can. You can. It never ceases to just blow my mind, the ways in which we can serve. I've seen it for our company. I've seen it for our graduates. I see it for our colleagues. I mean, I just keep seeing how much we can serve, and there's so much need right now. So if you have a desire and an inclination that you can be changing more lives, you can.
Absolutely. The ripple effect is absolutely incredible.